Did you find out who decided to put him outside the cemetery?
I did. You know, when you said Cott County in our group chat as you were out there researching, it rang a bell with me. And I'll be honest, it took a little too long for it to click. Cott County, Sutton. Cott County, Sutton.
Explain it to me, James.
Okay.
I have no idea.
You guys were in the moonshine capital of the world. Have you ever seen someone buried outside their family cemetery by themselves? Well, I haven't. And neither had Joey until he found this guy.
Spider John.
Who was John Henry Spider John Sutton? And whose idea was it to boot him from the family cemetery? Well, I'm about to tell you why. And I'm also going to tell you why his last name sounded so familiar. My name is James, and I've been a genealogist now for over 10 years. And this is Forgotten Lines, the channel where we like to bring attention to that little 2-inch line between dates on a tombstone. Because that 2-inch line represents that person's entire life. And most of the time, we have no idea what it is. It's easy to walk through a cemetery and see stone after stone and just see dates and numbers and dates and numbers. But when you sit and think about it, you see this person who was born in 1880 and maybe they died in 1970. That's 90 years. That person was 90 years old. And the only representation of that is a 2-inch line. And that's what we like to talk about. We like to find out what happened in that line. I thought we would give a quick update to people who might have seen our last video together. You found a picture on one of your journeys, and we were able to figure out who they were and tell a little bit about their story.
I think you were able to get the picture back to the family as well.
I am happy to say that, yes, the picture was returned to the family, and they were super excited about it. They were tickled pink about our coverage. And
Awesome.
I got to say, that was a wild experience. Like, the whole thing was super cool.
Yeah. I mean, that's part of the reason for the channel.
Yeah. I honestly, I didn't expect them to see it. I mean, I figured they would see it. I didn't think they would see it within a week.
Yeah.
I didn't think the family would see it that quickly and reach out. So that was awesome. You know, small world, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So if you haven't already checked that one out, the link is down below. Be sure to like and subscribe so we know you want to see more of that kind of thing. And if this is your first video, welcome aboard. So back to Spider John. Joey, tell me how you found this guy.
So, yeah, I took the whole family out to the Smoky Mountains. And every time I go to the Smoky Mountains, I like going somewhere different. And I found this spot in Cott County, a little hiking area. And I got there, and the roads were all close to the park. There was nowhere to go hiking. So I pulled up the old Google, and there was a cemetery right next to us. Driving up the road to the cemetery was worse than driving up my driveway.
Oh.
It was like a half mile.
You have to turn on your four-wheel drive.
Yeah, pretty much in my minivan.
Those things can get anywhere.
My mom luckily had a rental, so you can do whatever you want.
Oh
with
yeah,
those.
you're fine. Yeah. I'm pretty sure I've seen a minivan on one of those rock crawler videos.
There's a little fenced-in cemetery in the woods up in the holler. They had a headstone outside the cemetery. I thought it was just like a replacement headstone, so I didn't pay attention to it too much. And we went into the cemetery, and we started walking around and taking pictures. And as we were leaving, I figured I'd go look at that headstone because I'm like, it's kind of weird that it's out there. And as I got closer, it was an actual headstone. It wasn't a replacement headstone. There was an actual person buried there outside the cemetery, and I thought that was quite peculiar. And then on the headstone, it said Spider John right under is like a nickname. I was like, well, that's peculiar. So I started taking pictures like, James is going to be interested in this. Outside the cemetery has a nickname on it, and it has coins all over it. And my wife was like, oh, I just read about that. There's like a military thing with it. I'm like, okay, well, that's really interesting now.
You sent it to our group chat while you were out there, and a lot of the stones, I was like, okay, yeah, these are some cool stones, some cool names and everything. And then you sent the video of y'all walking around, and then there is John Sutton out by himself. And I was like, what is that? Who is this fellow?
Yeah.
And then I zoomed in on it, and there's Spider John on it. I'm like, well, there's got to be There's something about that guy.
There's something going on.
What was the name of this cemetery?
Yeah, it was a Tritt Cemetery, full of Tritts and Suttons.
You know, when you said Cott County in our group chat as you were out there researching, it rang a bell with me. And I'll be honest, it took a little too long for it to click.
It still hasn't clicked with me, James.
Cott County, Sutton. Cott County, Sutton.
Explain it to me, James.
Okay.
I have no idea.
You guys were in the Moonshine capital of the world.
I did not know that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, one of them. Anyway, several counties like to claim that, but it was one of the Moonshine capitals of the world.
Really?
Yeah. If you've ever seen an episode of Moonshiners, they mention the words Cott County in at least every episode. Arguably the most famous moonshiner of all time, Marvin Popcorn Sutton, lived in and around Cott County his whole life.
So, part of the family.
Don't get ahead of me.
You said Sutton. I said Sutton, the graveyards. I was kind of putting one and one together.
Yeah.
Was he buried there?
No.
Okay.
No, he's buried at home. He was buried in a family cemetery in North Carolina, like right on the other county.
Okay.
Because it butts up to the other county. He was buried in a public cemetery, well, a family one, and people just kept going out there and like pouring whiskey and stuff all over it. And so his wife had him picked up and moved to their house.
Fair enough.
So he's on private property now. So I started with the BMDCs like always. Birth, marriage, death, census. John Henry Sutton was born in 1871 to John Sutton and Jane Tritt. Here he is in 1880 with his parents on the census, and eagle-eye watchers will notice a couple discrepancies here. John's middle initial is L instead of H. Could this be indicative that we're on the wrong track? Maybe. But also in 1880 it says he's 7 years old, putting his birth date 2 years after 1871. But census takers were a special kind of unreliable, so it's important to consider other records and clues together. I've seen some census takers who were very meticulous. They put a bunch of notes down at the bottom. They wrote all over the pages. They were very careful.
Okay.
And then there's others where it just looks like scribbles on a page. And so when you have volunteers that are taking the census records and putting them online for us through like Ancestry and the LDS and those guys, Latter-day Saints,
Okay.
They have an especially difficult job deciphering the handwriting and the words and the numbers and everything else on them. So
Gotcha.
So things got missed sometimes. Not necessarily from the volunteers who were indexing, but the people with the pen and paper out in the middle of nowhere who were just ready to go home. And they were like, all right, he said H, I'm going to put L, whatever. I don't remember what he said. He gets out to his car and he's like, I don't remember what that guy said. I'm just going to put L or something like that, you know.
Yeah.
There's no telling. I mean, there's really no telling. So you have to be especially careful with any record, really. I mean, even nowadays.
Yeah.
I mean, every day you see people's. I mean, how many times has my name been misspelled my whole life?
Well, that's just anything. I mean, I went into the office and I had to tell them what my profession was, and they said, "What is your profession?" I said, "Woodworker," and it came back as woodmaker. Like, well, that's pretty cool. I can make wood.
That'd be cool. I didn't know that. Give me a new table.
That's right. It's not working. I'm sorry.
You lied on your application.
I didn't write it down.
You need to be more truthful in your interviews. So it's important to consider other clues and records together, like his death certificate, which names Jackson Sutton and Jane Tritt as his parents, and his birth date, which matches the stone, 1971. Okay, now who is this Jackson guy? I thought his dad's name was John. Well, Jack is often a nickname for a guy's named John. So nicknames are a bane of my existence in this stuff. Like, no joke. I didn't even know my own grandfather's real name until I was 15, and I saw it on his tombstone.
Really?
No joke. Yes. My grandmother called him Bill his entire life.
Okay.
Like, he would be in his room, his den, and then she would say, "Hey, Bill, you want a sandwich?" It was just always Bill. Like, whenever she'd yell at him while they're driving through traffic, it was, "Bill, watch out,"
Yeah.
I thought the man's name was William. No, it was John. and they called him Bill ever since he was little. It was just a nickname that his uncle gave him, and it stuck his entire life.
That's crazy.
So they would get mail and letters and actual things.
Everything.
Like people thought his name was Bill.
That's crazy.
But no, it was John. So
Yeah.
same kind of thing. You have to watch it with nicknames. Again, we have to look elsewhere for confirmation. Spider John's brother James' death certificate confirms their dad's name was John C. Sutton with Jane Tritt. I later found out that C stood for Cornelius.
Oh.
So there we go. Dates and name variations don't always match. In fact, they hardly ever match. Is it frustrating? 1,000%. Can we work around it? Absolutely. We just have to look at the sum of all parts and accept that record keeping throughout history is just terrible. Not only that, but people either straight up lied about their ages or weren't even sure or misspoke. Sometimes people would say they were about 37 years old, or they didn't want the census man to know, and so they would just throw a number out. Then they would just be off a little bit. People trying to stay off the grid.
Sounds like people today.
Moving on. Spider John married Margaret Barnes in 1897. They appeared to have 3 children together, Octavia, Ethelyn, and Clyde. John would work as a farmer for several years until in 1920 he's listed as fireman in the skidder industry, which basically means he was the guy shoveling coals into the train's firebox to keep it going, and skidders were basically logging machines for taking down trees for lumber, or as you would call them, wood makers. Which is what you lied and said you were.
Not what I would call them. Not what I would call them. What the county clerk would call them. Funny thing is, I did see one of those trains while I was there. It was one of the actual ones that went into the mountains. They had special trains that went into the mountains to harvest the logs and bring them out. And so they were special geared trains to drive into the mountains.
That's cool. So when you say it had gears, you don't mean it had teeth on the wheel. You mean that instead of those big, long, like pole-looking things turning the wheels, it actually had gears turning it.
Yep, exactly.
Like cogs.
Yep.
Kind of. That's cool. And
Yeah.
what was that, for more torque?
Yeah, more torque, and so it could climb the mountain, so it could do a steeper grade. So I think a regular train can do like a 4% grade, where this could do like a 7% grade.
All right, gotcha. That's cool stuff. John died in 1954 due to third-degree burns on his left leg. The explanation says he fell into his fireplace. Now, I try to picture things in my head when I read certain stuff like that, and this one has me stumped. I tried to picture how that would happen exactly. If you have a fireplace, how do you fall into it foot first?
This is moonshine territory, right?
You know,
I mean, was it a fireplace?
was it
with a big pot on top
right,
of
a pot
it?
on top?
And
I don't know. Like it sounds a little odd. I mean, the man was like 80 something years old, 83 years old when this happened. So
how old was Popcorn in the last episode he filmed?
62 or 3 or something like that. Yeah, it is
Not
when he passed.
out of the realm of possibility.
Yeah, no, those guys were doing it long into it.
I did hay baling, and the guy we bought the hay bale equipment, he was 91 the last time he hay baled.
Golly, man. Those dudes are different.
Did you find out who decided to put him outside the cemetery?
I did. I was able to track down a specific record donated to the University of Tennessee in Knoxville by an Appalachian researcher who was able to get an answer to this same question years ago.
Awesome.
And this is what UT sent me right here. So it says, Spider John proclaimed on his deathbed, "Bury me outside the cemetery gate. I don't want to be buried inside with those G.D. Suttons." His dying wish was granted, and also for the first 40 years following his death, he did not have a tombstone. March 28th, 2004, photo by Pete Prince.
So he didn't like the Suttons, huh?
Nope. Nope. It was his idea.
Wow. Okay.
It was his decision. It wasn't his family kicked him out. He said, I don't want to be anywhere near them for the rest of eternity.
That's crazy.
So, why?
That is my question.
So he couldn't stand it. I thought when you were first sending me this stuff where it said Trit, and then I figured out the Moonshine stuff, I was like, okay, well, maybe the Trits had a problem with his way of life.
Mm-hmm.
Until I got that back, and clearly someone was able to talk to his family and figure out, no, it was a different reason.
Now, the Trits are his family?
It's his mom.
Okay.
His
And
mom is
the
Jane
Sutton-
Tritt.
Okay, and the Suttons are his dad's.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I was able to find out his entire family was packed with Moonshine runners. Similar names all over the place. Now, what I don't know is whether he was doing it himself and they stole from him, or maybe they got him busted once, someone ratted him out. Maybe he was standing near a still they made and it exploded, tearing up his leg that killed him and that made him mad. Or maybe he was a normal guy and he couldn't stand that the Sutton name had become synonymous with outlaw. I don't know. But man, it is fun to think about.
Yeah. Well, this nickname, that makes sense. If he was a booze runner or a moonshine runner.
But to be fair, I mean, people get nicknames out of nowhere for no reason.
Fair
so,
enough.
He
But
might have stepped
it ties
on
into the lore of it all. So.
He might have got bit by a spider in school or something, and his leg swelled up, and that stuck his. There's no telling. But if you're watching this video and you happen to know how Spider John got his nickname, or
why he hated his family,
why he couldn't stand his family so bad, leave a comment down below because we want to hear from you. I was able to find over a dozen news articles involving Suttons being caught by revenuers throughout the first half of the 1900s. In fact, one of the other Suttons you found in Tritt Cemetery is featured in a news article involving 4 busted stills.
Really?
Yeah. Donald Sutton.
Okay, and this is his cousin, nephew?
One of them. Yeah.
Okay.
Honestly, I thought about making a tree big enough to connect all of the newspaper articles, but there were so many of them. Like,
that would be really cool.
Suffice it to say, the Suttons in Cott County were up to some shenanigans at the time.
My one question would be, was there not already a tree made because of like all of their TV history and stuff?
Popcorn has had some genealogy done.
Okay.
And I was able to use some of that as a starting point. But honestly, I didn't really look too hard. I like to do my own trees when doing genealogy. I try not to rely on other trees that I come across because I didn't do that research, so I can't verify that certain things are correct. I might look at them to help if I'm like stumped or something to help me with a clue. But generally, I take trees that I find with a grain of salt.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
Yeah. There were loads of stills busted, bootlegger high-speed car chases, guys escaping. I mean, real Thunder Road stuff. Yeah.
Just Dukes of Hazzard all the way.
I mean, I wanted to use that song, Ballad of Thunder Road, for this video, but, copyright and whatnot.
So my question now is, Popcorn and John Sutton are both in Cott County. They're both moonshine. Well, one's a moonshiner for sure. The other one has a whole family of moonshiners. Are they related?
Yes. Okay. Second cousin, twice removed.
I know exactly what that is.
Do you?
Not at all.
All right. So
I'm not the genealogist, obviously.
So it's often a fun subject talking about the removed stuff. So what that basically means is you have a common ancestor with somebody, but you're at a different generation from them.
Okay.
So for example, the 2 guys, Popcorn and Spider John, they share Cornelius Sutton, born in 1801 as a common ancestor. He is Spider John's great-grandfather. But for Popcorn, he is his great-great-great-grandfather.
Okay.
So they are cousins, but they are removed from the common ancestor by a certain number.
Gotcha.
All right. So we check our handy dandy cousin chart, and it tells us the relation is second cousin twice removed. That's what that means.
Pretty simple.
Side note, Joey, do you know how Popcorn got his nickname?
I have no idea.
When he was younger, I think this took place in the 60s, he was trying to get a bag of popcorn out of a vending machine, and it got stuck. And he attacked the vending machine to get his popcorn out. So everyone called him Popcorn.
Fair enough. I'm assuming he got the popcorn.
I don't know. So we've got John Henry Spider John Sutton, a man who was buried outside of his own family cemetery, had an interesting enough nickname to be put on his gravestone. He's buried in the Moonshine capital of the world. And as if that's not enough, the man has coins all over his stone. And that was something else. What was that? What was that like, walking up onto that and finding coins all over his stone?
Yeah, I was going up closer to the stone, and as I got closer, you could see coins. There were a ton of coins all over it. And I was just telling my wife, look at this, and she's like, oh yeah, there's a whole thing around that in the military. But I don't think it's military for him. I think it's more of a wishing well thing, because there's a whole hierarchy of coins in the military, and each coin has a particular meaning. It was just a whole bunch of different ones. So I think since the headstone was outside the cemetery, people were just putting them on as kind of like a good luck thing or like a wishing well. That was my theory behind it.
Well, I think you're right. I think you're exactly right. So coins on a gravestone typically do indicate military service. A penny signifies a visit to the grave. He had a lot of nickels. It looked like a lot of silver.
A lot of nickels, a lot of quarters.
Yeah. A nickel indicates that the visitor trained at boot camp with the deceased.
Okay.
So going back to the UT article, it said that he didn't even have a stone until 40 years later.
Yeah.
So that stone wasn't put in until the 90s, like 94-ish,
Yeah.
like somewhere around there. So the coins that you would have seen on the stone were only that old. So
the oldest one could have been 94.
yeah, I have a hard time believing that somebody trained at boot camp with Spider John and visited him in the late 90s. A dime means the visitor served with the deceased service member at some point, and a quarter indicates that the visitor was present when the deceased service member died.
The other thing about the tombstone is the whole graveyard is right next to a trail that heads up into the Smoky Mountains right there. So it might have been like a hiker thing where you put it on the tombstone for good luck.
Yeah, I don't think we're the only ones who have been interested in his stone.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Well, the coins,
Okay.
because since I couldn't find any real records of John having ever served in the military, I did find out that coins on a grave are a lot of times a symbol of respect.
Okay.
It is kind of like a wishing well thing. Like, hey, Spider John, you're out here by yourself. That makes me feel bad. Here is something to let you know that I'm thinking of you now.
Okay.
I think that's what it is. But we don't have to feel bad for him because he asked for that. He wanted to be buried out there.
Yeah.
So at first glance, yeah, you do feel bad that he's over by himself. It's like, oh man, why is this guy all by his lonesome? And it's like, well, because he wanted to be. He couldn't stand those Suttons. I feel better knowing that John Henry Sutton was buried outside of the family cemetery because that's what he wanted, and not because his family shunned him or some burial oversight. John lived among a wild bunch of cousins, and it's hard to tell if he approved of their lifestyle or rejected it. Either way, a small bit of John Sutton's story will last a little bit longer now.
If you like this video and this kind of content, be sure to like and subscribe. And let us know if you have any thoughts or anything you know about Spider John or the Suttons. We'd love to hear from you.
Unless it's mean. See you next time.